think we are all set. Hi, Suzanne. Nice to see you. Nico, are you asking how many people are here? We are at 70. Rafaela, that's a good question. We don't have an online course yet, like a group course. Whoops, sorry for the feedback. One moment. There we go. So we don't have a group course yet for CPE exams, but we do offer one-to-one preparation for CPE, if that's something that people are interested in. Hi, Katarina from Italy. Nice. A couple more people from India. Awesome. Okay. So welcome. If you haven't already and you're just joining, go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. I'm Shannon, as some of you know, and I'm here in Boston, where it's a kind of nice spring day, not too bad outside. And I'm really excited to bring you this workshop on how to teach reading specifically online. All right, so let's dive in. In this session, we've got a lot to go over. So I'm going to be moving pretty quickly, but don't worry, the session is being recorded. And the fact that you're registered means that you will receive access to the recording as well. So if you feel like you missed anything or you couldn't quite take notes fast enough, after the session is finished airing live, you'll receive an email that will have the link to where you can watch the recording. And it's going to be that same link and that same page for all 4 of the recordings. So if you miss any of the other workshops coming up, you'll be able to find all the recordings once it's finished in the same place. Hey, Joyce. Hey, Joan. Hey, Barbara. Nice to see all of you. Okay, so in this session, we are going to be talking about, first of all, how to select and present texts for reading lessons online. Oh, and Nico has a quick question. The recordings will be available through May 5th. It's a week from today, so you've got a full week to watch them. All right, we'll also talk about how to motivate students to read, because I think that's a big hesitation for a lot of teachers, is they worry about even getting their students ready to read and making their students want to do a reading lesson, right? It sounds kind of boring if you're not sure how to set it up in an effective way. We'll talk a little bit about how to deal with vocabulary in reading lessons. That's another big sort of block for many teachers, is they wonder, okay, if there are a lot of unknown words in the text, how do I deal with that? So we'll go through that. We'll talk about what it means to actually develop students' reading skills rather than just kind of going through the motions of making them read something. We'll go over some common mistakes that I see in reading lessons and how to avoid those. And then finally, we'll do a Q&A at the end. So if you do have any questions, I can address those. And I'll also give you a special offer in case you're looking for even more training going forward. So as we're getting started, it's a great idea, if you can, of course, I know we're all working from home these days, many of us, to minimize any distractions around you. As I said, we'll go through a ton of information. Obviously, feel free to take notes if you can, as much as you can. But again, the session is being recorded, so you can watch the recording afterwards if you feel like you want to review anything. As many of you are already doing, you can use the chat feature to interact with me and with everybody else here and ask questions as we go. And don't forget, if you're just joining, to set your chat to all panelists and attendees. That's that little blue bar just above where you type. That way everybody can see what you type and not just me. Since we have so many people here, which is awesome, we're at just about 100 people now, you won't be able to like raise your hand and jump on the mic, unfortunately, because of timing issues and tech issues and things. So if you do have a question, you don't need to raise your hand, just go ahead and type it into the chat. Or you can use the Q&A feature, which is on your Zoom kind of toolbar. So you can use that Q&A feature if you want to make sure that I definitely answer your question at the end. Particularly if it's something that's not like immediately relevant, go ahead and use the Q&A feature for your question. That way it won't get lost. The chat tends to move pretty quickly. So if I don't see it right away, it might, get lost in the shuffle. If I miss anything in the chat, go ahead and put it in the Q&A and I'll definitely see it by the end. All right, so if you haven't already, go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself. Welcome everybody. Go ahead, if you haven't introduced yourself yet in the chat, tell me where you're from if you'd like, where you are now if that's a different place. And then let me know, are you currently an online teacher? If so, what do you teach? A few people have said they teach beginners or they teach IELTS or TOEFL prep or CPE, CAE, somebody said. And if you're not an online teacher yet, why not? What's kind of holding you back, or what are you waiting to do or to feel before you start teaching online? While you're all doing that, I'll introduce myself for those of you who don't know me. Great to meet all of you. My name is Shannon Felt. I'm the founder of TEFL Horizons, which is where you found this webinar. And I am originally, of course, an English language teacher. So I've been a teacher for many, many years in many places, in many contexts. I'm also an ESL teacher trainer. So I've trained on CELTA courses and other courses, trained a lot of teachers around the world. And more recently, I've become an ESL consultant. So I've helped language schools start up their programs and curriculums. And I've designed online courses for English teachers specifically. So not so much for students now, but actually for English teachers who are looking to get certified or improve their teaching. So I started TEFL Horizons basically because I wanted a place where teachers could find really quality online training advice in one place without having to invest thousands of dollars, right, in lots of different courses. So in my years of training teachers, what I found is the teachers would benefit so much from the training course. And then they would say, okay, but what now, right? Like everything I've found online is just kind of a random collection of exercises without really any training as to how to use them, or without any opportunities in terms of, where to get further training or to review the training that I've already gotten. So it was my goal to create that place where if you did a CELTA, for example, you could come and review that information and get that same quality of information that you felt like you got in your training course. Or if you wanted a follow-up course, or if you wanted a kind of pre-training course to get you ready, all of that is on TEFL Horizons. So look around if you haven't already next time you're on the site. I do a podcast, there's a blog, and a lot of other free resources, as well as some paid courses that you can check out. Okay, so go ahead and tell me about yourself. Let's see who else is here. We've got Katarina is an English teacher at middle school. Okay. Yeah, sounds like, oh, wow, you had an asynchronous month because of lockdown. Yep, I think a lot of us have experienced that. A few people say they're looking for a part-time teaching job. Great. And oh, let me go ahead. Somebody just asked for the website that I was talking about. So that's teflhorizons.com. But go ahead and wait until after the session to check it out. Okay, Juliet from South Africa, difficult to find teaching opportunities. A lot of people teaching exam prep here, love it. So Marta teaches FCE and intermediate, upper intermediate. Yeah, a lot of people are saying they're only online at the moment because of the pandemic and lockdown. Catherine McFarland's here, hi, nice to see you. Ronald is here. Juliet, hi Juliet, Judy Guy, nice to see you from DC, awesome. Many of you know I lived in DC for quite a while. Great city. A couple people are secondary school teachers, great. A few CELTA tutors, online CELTA, yep. Okay, awesome. So welcome, oh, thank you. Someone just said, I love your podcast, I appreciate that. Okay, great, so I'm sorry if I missed you, but I'm very happy you're here, and thank you so much for saying hi and joining today. So without further ado, let's get into how to teach reading online. So first thing let's talk about is how we can select and present texts online. Right, so first things first is how do you find these texts? You might see that I have a nice shelf of resource books behind me. That's awesome if I'm making copies for my in-person classes. Online doesn't really work so well, right? How do I take these physical books and give them to my students over Zoom if I want to do a reading lesson on one of the texts in there? So what I would recommend is using an electronic course book, like a PDF version of maybe one of these books that you like. A series that I particularly like, just my own personal preference in terms of the layout and kind of how it's designed, is the American English File series. You can also find the regular English File series. The American is the Americanized version. This is something that you would need to purchase or find online. But if you go to elt.oup.com, that's the Oxford University Press website, they offer all of the additional resources for online English teacher, American English file there. So you can find the audio, you can find some supplementary videos. It's super helpful and it's pretty easy to navigate. So definitely for online teaching tools, I would check out that website. But if you're working for a language school, this shouldn't be something that you have to seek out. Like, you should have whatever organization you're working for should provide you with a course book that you're using, something electronic. If not, it is possible to find a text anywhere you'd like, right? You can find a blog post that you think would be interesting or an article for your students. And then that's going to be a little bit easier. It just may mean that you need to retype it if it's in a longer format, like into your PowerPoint slide or your Google slide or whatever you're using. So once you have, let's say you've chosen a course book or you've been provided with a course book, electronic version from the organization that you're working for, or you've purchased one on your own, this is maybe what a typical reading lesson would look like on the page on that PDF. So this is from American English File 3A. It's an intermediate level course book from Oxford University Press. And as you can see, if I just take a screenshot of the whole page, it's a little hard to read on the PowerPoint slide. This is not the most accessible for students. So I do recommend using this electronic coursebook material and taking a screenshot, and you can then put it into your PowerPoint or Google Slides presentation. But you're probably going to want to zoom in. And this might require being a little bit creative with how you take your screenshots. So for example, I took 2 separate screenshots of this article, and it looks like that once I put them together on my slide. So this is, as you can see, much easier to read and see, and a lot kinder for the students to not make them squint at the text. So that's one option. You can just take the screenshots and then directly put them into your PowerPoint presentation or Google Slides presentation. Those are the 2 things that I recommend as kind of your online visual for teaching. Another option is to check out Google Forms. If you haven't tried this before, I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's a really neat free tool. The students don't need Google to sign on to it, and there aren't even any share settings that you have to adjust. So basically, if you go to, like, in your browser, search Google Forms, and you should find it pretty quickly. And you can basically insert text, you can insert pictures, and you can create questions. You could actually create the reading exercises that you might find over here, for example, right in the same Google form. And it just generates a link like this that you would then share with your students. They can click on it, access it, and they have the whole text and all the reading questions, for example, right there. So this is what the one Google form looks like that I made for this particular text. I'll share that with you now. There's what it will look like, the preview for when the students see it. So basically, I can put the title here. I can actually do a lot with the design, putting in pictures. I can put the text into a picture, like take those same screenshots, and both of them should be here. I'm not sure why the first one isn't loading. There we go. So as you can see, it's really easy for the students to see the text. They can scroll down, and at the bottom, I can put all the questions. So the students have the text and all the questions they need on the same form. When they're finished, they can click submit, and it actually sends me their responses. So I can see exactly how they've done on the exercise and give them some really personalized and specific feedback. You can change the question format. So here I have all short answers. But if you choose what kind of question you want to create, you can do multiple choice. You can do like checkboxes where you choose all the answers that apply. You can do longer answers if you want the students to write more information. So it's really fun to play around with and a really nice tool for teaching reading lessons when there's too much to fit on one slide. So that's a great tool that I love to use. Also awesome for those of you teaching exam prep. I use Google Forms almost exclusively when doing TOEFL or IELTS reading lessons, because you know those are some long texts and the students need to have a lot of questions accessible as well as they're reading. So Google Forms are definitely the way to go for that. Okay, so that's my advice for presenting and sharing materials with the students. Now let's think about, once we've got the materials ready, how do we make the students want to read them? This is always a little bit of a struggle for teachers at first. How do we get our students excited about these reading exercises? All right, here are a couple of ways you could begin your reading lesson. Take a look and see, what do you think? Is it an interesting and motivating way to begin the lesson? So I could say this to my students. Go ahead and type into the chat if you've got an opinion. Everybody's already saying no, resounding no. Nope, that would be boring, somebody said. Awesome. Yes, this is a pet peeve of mine. When people start lessons like this, I know that the intention is good, right? You want to be transparent with the students about what they'll be learning that day. However, not the most exciting way to start the lesson, right? If the students don't feel like practicing reading, they're probably not going to be super excited about this lesson. What about this? Any better? Oh, let's fix my big mistake there. There we go. Common one, even for us English trainers. What do you think? Yeah, someone said a bit better, but it still could be a lot better, right? At least now we've given some sort of context. We've said that it's about food and how it affects, with an A, your mood and performance. But it's still not, it's still kind of dry. Like, we're going to read a text. So instead, scrap all of that, right? There's no need to start the lesson with any kind of narration or explanation of what students are going to do. They'll figure it out once you start the lesson. That's going to become clear very quickly. Aside from those two examples of how you could but don't want to start a lesson, one issue with those, as we said, is that it's boring, right? Aside from the fact that those are kind of boring. The other issue with starting the lesson that way is it sets you up to launch into this kind of pre-lesson monologue. Because when I do this, I'm starting the lesson with teacher talk. I'm starting the lesson by explaining to the students what will happen, what is happening. I'm starting as a lecturer. And that's not the way I want to start the lesson or really do any part of the lesson as an effective English teacher. I want to keep things student-centered. And a trick that I use is, as soon as possible, I need to get the students involved. I need to ask the students a question. I need to get the students talking, because that is going to sort of propel me into that student-centered realm and make sure that I stay away from starting as a lecturer. So we don't want to start this way, because this is going into lecture mode. So instead of that, we'll look at a more student-centered way to do a lead-in. So we're going to avoid that narration. There's no need to get technical and tell the students exactly what they're going to learn or what skills they're going to practice or what vocabulary they're going to cover, right? That's going to be obvious once we actually get into the lesson. So instead, we want to engage the students just in the topic of the text. Just pick out whatever the topic is before the students even know that they're going to be reading anything, and get the students engaged in that topic. So you could do something like asking the students a direct question or questions that they can discuss. Maybe you could show some pictures related to the topic and ask the students what the pictures make them think of or what they see in the pictures. Or maybe you could even use those pictures and have the students predict or guess what they think will happen in the lesson or what they think they might read about. If it's relevant, you could even have a quote, find a quote about healthy eating or about food and how it can affect your mood, and ask the students to discuss whether they agree or disagree with it. So these are all ways that instantly get the students engaged, and it makes the lesson about them. The lesson is never about us as the teacher. It should always be about the students and the experience that they're having. So here, the students get to instantly somehow personally engage with the topic of the lesson. What do I think, right, as the student? And so now the lesson matters to me because I'm involved somehow in a personal way. Awesome. Yeah, some people are saying pictures are really, really useful. Yeah, share pictures of certain foods and ask them, do you like this food? Does it make you sleepy? Does it make you energized? Um, Great. And yes, someone brought up the good point that doing this, getting the students into the theme or the topic of the material before you get into the reading is helping them sort of activate their knowledge on this topic. So even though we're not explicitly trying to get them to use any certain vocabulary, just doing something like this, getting the students involved right away, is kind of activating their knowledge of maybe vocab words they know related to this topic. It's helping them recall their prior knowledge. So all of this, in addition to getting them engaged, is going to help prepare them once they do get to the text to dive into it more easily. So that's an additional benefit. They don't get any of that if we're just talking at them. Yes, so many people are saying activate schemata. Exactly. Really important. Good. Diana, I find that as well. I think my students love predicting what they're going to read about. Or, for example, predicting something about the topic, right? Look at these 3 foods. Which ones do you think help you sleep? Which ones do you think give you nightmares, or whatever is going to be answered in the text? Good. Okay. So for example, for this lesson, some of you had similar ideas to what I'm about to show you. I could do something like this, right? Pretty simple, nothing too complicated, but at least now the students are personally involved. A couple of you had other really great ideas. There's no wrong answer here. Anything using one of those techniques we mentioned or somehow getting the students personally engaged in the topic is going to be great and so much better than just saying, today we're going to do a reading exercise, right? All right, excellent. So then that's one way to motivate the students. Another really important way that we can motivate our students is how we approach the reading exercises themselves. So for the actual reading exercise or exercises, it's important that you set a clear task for the reading exercise before you have students read. This is important for several reasons. The first of which is, I think if you give someone a text or you show someone a text on a PowerPoint slide and say, here, read this, a pretty natural response would be, okay, why? Like, why am I reading this? What do you want me to get out of this, right? So by giving students a task, read this and check the predictions that you made in the lead-in. Were you correct, right, in the previous exercise? Or read this and answer these 3 questions. Read this and see which foods are good for you and which foods are not good for you according to the author. So by having the students understand what they're reading going in, now they're motivated. If I'm a student and I've made predictions about these 5 foods that I saw pictures of in the previous stage of the lesson, now I have a reason for reading because I want to know if I was right. Do blueberries really make you sleepy? Whatever it is. So now I'm interested. There's a reason for me to read. And this is so much more motivating than someone just showing me a text and say, read this with no reason why. An additional benefit of doing this is that if students know what they're looking for before they read, this is going to support them in getting that information from the text. It can be a little bit overwhelming or intimidating for students if you tell them that they have to read something with no other parameters or instruction, because then the unspoken assumption is that they have to understand everything or they need to get all of the information from the text, which is really not possible. And it's stressful, right? The first time they read to think that they need to understand every single thing. That's why students don't like reading. A lot of the time is because that's the feeling, is that if they don't understand a word, they have to stop, they have to look it up. It's tedious, it's scary. So by showing them a clear task in advance, even without explicitly saying it, you're sending the message that it's okay if you don't get everything the first time around. All you need to understand is just enough to do this task or to answer this question, right? That's it. Just enough to check your predictions. And so that is more manageable in that moment for the students to accomplish. So we call this rule task before text. If you need kind of something that's easy to remember, always think task before text. Tell them what the task is, what they're supposed to be doing before you give them the actual text to read. All right, so all of this is going to be not only less intimidating and more enjoyable, but it's going to be that extra motivation for the students to do the reading exercises in the first place. Someone said depending on the levels, though. Nico, that might have been, oh, there we go. Yep, I was going to say that looks like a follow-up from a previous comment. I do think that sometimes it might be okay to read without any previous task. Let them get into the reading. I disagree. I think it's not that previous task maybe is not the right way to say it if I implied that. It's not that they need to have done something like a prediction necessarily in the previous task. It could be questions that they just see for the first time right at that reading stage. But I think there's never any reason to tell the students, read this and nothing else. Right? I mean, at the very least, it should be read this and tell me what it's about. Tell me what the main idea is. That's still not a great task. But it should always be read this and what, right? Like, what do you want me to do with it? Good. Yes. And we can make that more or less challenging. Like, as Penny said, with lower levels, you can provide options to choose from. Yep. Like multiple choice. Great. Yep. So you can adjust your task, but I think always there needs to be some kind of task that the students are looking for when they read. One exception is if you are teaching exam prep. Some exams don't allow the students to look at the questions before reading. So obviously that's a different thing because you're preparing the students specifically to succeed on that exam. And in that case, you should set it up however the exam is going to be set up. But otherwise, students should always have something that they're reading for. All right, good. So now we've got our students motivated. We've got them doing the reading and vocabulary. So there's vocabulary in the text. How do we deal with not letting the students get super overwhelmed with potentially unknown words? All right, so to answer this question, let's back up a little bit. Most important thing we need to think about when we think about dealing with vocabulary in a reading lesson is this. Type it into the chat. Don't overthink it. What's the main aim of a reading lesson? Okay, a lot of you are saying to get the general idea, or a few of you are saying to develop overall comprehension, general idea of the text. Kind of. That could be the aim of one particular reading stage. The first time they read, probably the aim is to get the general comprehension of the text. But overall, like the whole reading lesson, yes, that's it, to develop students' reading skills. Awesome. So to develop students' reading comprehension. So this is important to remember because for a lot of newer teachers or a lot of teachers without really good solid training, it's really easy to think that every lesson is about teaching grammar and vocabulary because that's kind of how we think of English or language in a lot of ways, like it's new words and it's new grammar. So that's what I'm always trying to do. But that's not true. That's not all it is. That's a huge part of learning a language. But another huge part of learning a language is developing skills. That's why I'm doing this series of webinars. And skills involve things like comprehension, right? Like how do we understand when someone else is speaking? Understand what we're reading, understand what we're listening to. How do we speak and write fluently? That's a totally different thing than having the individual words and the individual grammatical structures. Those are kind of the building blocks, like having the vocabulary and having the grammar that we can put together. But it's the comprehension and the fluency, the production. That's how communication really happens, is having those skills. So it's important to keep this in mind because if we're thinking about dealing with vocabulary in a reading lesson, we need to remember that that's not the point. That's not the aim. Obviously, it's something we're going to need to deal with. There are words in the text, but our goal is not to teach vocabulary in a reading lesson. That's a different lesson. It's a vocabulary lesson. So keep that in mind as we go through this. So your aim in a reading lesson is to develop students' reading comprehension, not to teach vocabulary. So that means don't make a big deal about vocabulary, and the students probably won't either. That being said, take a look at some of these things that I've heard teachers say in reading lessons. What do you think is the problem with each of these? Why is it maybe not the best thing to do or say in a reading lesson? Right. Yeah. Somebody just made the point. Vocab is just a tool towards understanding comprehension. In a reading lesson, yes, exactly. So we're not teaching vocab kind of in its own right in a reading lesson. If we're dealing with vocabulary in a reading lesson, it's only, as you've just said so nicely, just as a tool towards understanding and comprehension. Yeah. Okay. So lots of good ideas here. Yep. Dee made a good point. It takes the focus away from the reading, or someone else said the lesson will become about vocab. Good. It's teacher fronted, kind of. Yeah. So a couple issues here. First of all, I hear this first question a lot. And again, the intention behind it is good, right? You just want to help the students and you're just concerned that maybe there were some unknown words that you could teach them, right? So they can walk away with that satisfaction. However, if you say this, there are two different possibilities that could happen, sort of two different extremes that could happen in response to this question. Number one, the students have no questions at all. There's silence, crickets. And then if you've budgeted time for this part of the lesson, you now have not used any of that time and you have extra time. Not the worst thing in the world, but it's a bit awkward. Other extreme, you've now opened a can of worms by inviting the students to ask you to define on the spot effectively every single word in the text. I don't know about you, but I don't want to do that. That does not sound like a pleasant experience for me, and it doesn't sound useful for the students. Because if you have tried to teach vocabulary, you know that it's not really as easy as it first looks. There's a lot that goes into it. You need a good, clear, concise definition. You need a backup plan in case the students don't understand that definition. You need concept checking questions to confirm that the students understand. You need to be able to help them with pronunciation. You need to be able to answer questions about form. Is it an adjective? Is it an adverb? Why, right? So by asking this question, you're basically saying that you're prepared to do all of that with every single word in the text, which even if you are really confident in your own ability to do that, it's probably not going to come across as effectively as it could because you're still going to be doing at least some of it on the spot, or you've spent like 12 hours planning this lesson, right? Like one or the other. So you don't want to do that. Plus, it could take forever. That could be the rest of your lesson is answering questions about vocabulary, which, as so many of you just said, then the focus is no longer on reading, right? So don't ask this question. Just don't. There's really no good, but there's no benefit to it. It also is encouraging teacher dependence because by asking this, you're sort of implicitly telling the students that, oh, if you don't understand something in the text, just ask the teacher, right? Don't try to figure it out by yourself. Don't use independent learning strategies. Just ask me. I'm the source of all knowledge, which is also something we don't want to do. We want to encourage our students to be independent learners. Obviously, students may have questions. They may come up as they're reading, excuse me, can you tell me the meaning of this word or what does this word mean? That's fine. Go ahead and answer as best you can on the spot and then move on. But the point is you don't have to invite those questions. And you would actually be surprised if you don't invite that, it doesn't really happen. Assuming you have given the students clear tasks so they know what they're reading for, and you don't invite them to ask about vocabulary, they usually don't. These are a little better because at least you're not sort of opening that can of worms, but it's still really teacher fronted. So it's still very, let me explain the words from the text to you instead of the students learning something or kind of working through something on their own. So let's look at some alternatives to dealing with vocabulary. So first thing, as we said, definitely avoid asking students to define a word or inviting questions about vocabulary. But that doesn't mean that we ignore the fact that there might be potentially challenging vocabulary in the reading exercise. So what we can do, if you think that there are certain words that may be blocking. So by blocking, I mean the students won't know the word you think. You're predicting the students won't know this word, and they will need to know this word to do the reading exercises that you've planned. Then that would be considered a blocking word. So in that case, you could teach some of that blocking vocabulary before the reading exercises. Instead of just telling the students, here are these 5 words and here's what they mean, make it more student-centered by creating a task like a matching exercise where the students match the word and the definition. This way, the students are working through the exercise on their own in a more engaging and interactive way. You've dealt with some of the vocabulary you think will be blocking or unknown, and you're not inviting questions about all of the other vocabulary in the text. So you're sort of picking out just what you think the students will need to do the reading exercises that you've set. Okay, good. Yes, a lot of you are saying similar things. Yes, like Chad said, need to prepare beforehand what key vocab you want to review. And I would say, Chad, almost you could do that before the task if it's related to the reading, not after. You can do like a vocabulary post-teach after, but then you are kind of getting into more of a vocabulary aim there. Yes, exactly. Pre-teaching, perfect. Okay, good. Yeah, tons of great comments here. Sarah, I don't send the actual PowerPoint slides, but I do give you access to the recording of the webinar. The PowerPoint slides they stay with me. They're available only in the online English teacher platform that we'll talk about at the end. And yes, a few people are just joining. You will definitely be able to watch this recording again. It's available for a week after it airs live, and I'll send you the link in an email after this. Okay, great. So we've dealt with vocabulary. Now, finally, some more general advice for just making sure, excuse me, lots of teacher talk on my end, that we develop students' reading skills instead of just kind of pull them through the motions of reading. So to develop students' reading skills, for this section of the webinar, let's do a little exercise, one of my favorite do or don't quizzes. So feel free to play in the chat. I'll show you a statement and you decide whether you think it's a do or a don't in a reading lesson specifically. Go ahead and answer in the chat what you think. So first one should be pretty easy because we talked about this. So set a task before students read. This one you should know now. Is it a do or a don't? Awesome. Yes. 100% correct. So always set a task as we discussed. So the students know why they're reading and they're motivated to read. How about this one? Should you allow the students to look at the questions while they're reading? Okay, most of you are correct. It's a do. Yep. Some people I've heard think this maybe it's a don't because they're afraid the students will get distracted. Like how do they balance between the questions and the text at the same time? But this is important because we want to make sure the students can actually use any resources that they have to do the reading tasks. So by having the questions and the text at the same time, right, they can look back and forth, they can pick out key words from the questions and look for them in the text. It's going to support them in their reading. So this means that online, it can be a little bit tricky because you need to figure out how to display the questions and the text at the same time. So somehow you're going to need to fit all of that on a slide. That's why Google Forms is super helpful. Another option is to first, remember task before text, first show a slide with the questions, tell the students to take a screenshot, and then the next slide could be the text. Yeah, so Patrick said, are you suggesting showing the questions alongside the reading simultaneously? Yes, I am. If you can set it up in a way that still allows the text to be, visible and readable. But at the very least, show the students the questions first or put the questions in the chat. Any way that they have access to the questions while they're reading the text is important. No, and it does seem like it could be overloading or overwhelming, but it's not. It's important for the students to have both. Personally, I think most people, it's not even that personal. It's probably much more overloading or overwhelming to ask them to remember the questions and read at the same time, rather than not having to remember and having the questions right there that they can look back at if they need a refresher, right? Okay, good. Next one. What do you think about this one? Awesome. Yes, so many people are saying don't. Very good. Great, don't. This is a big part of developing students' reading skills as opposed to simply just having them read without any sort of development. This is where the students get more time to process, to go back through things. Yes, so multiple reading is what we want to do with the same text. So the first time students read, they should have an opportunity to read just for maybe something easier or more general. Yeah, as someone just said, the first one can be for skimming and just kind of getting acquainted with the text. The second time, students can then go back and read for more detail. But again, both times there should be a task set up front. The students should know why they're reading, and they should have an opportunity to read alone, check with their partner, and then go over the answers. And then you can repeat that same process for the next reading stage, excuse me, with new or maybe more detailed or more difficult questions. Good. Yeah. So if you only have the students read the text once, that's not really developing their reading, is it? It's just they read and then they were done. Like, how do you know that their reading improved or their ability to understand the text improved throughout the lesson? Good. Oh, and Patrick, you just asked a great question that we're going to get to in the very next one. Oops, sorry, one after this. There's one more. Don't worry, we're going to get to your question, Patrick. So next one. Awesome. Yep. Many of you are saying don't. Very good. Why? Why are you all saying don't? You're correct. Right. Yes. Okay. Somebody said isolate the skill, which is interesting because obviously skills don't work in isolation. They're all sort of connected. But this stuff is going to, obviously grammar, vocabulary, it's all going to come up if they're reading those grammatical structures or those vocabulary words. But you're right. That's not the aim, as so many of you are saying. It's not the aim of a reading lesson. So this is not the time to tell students, okay, when you answer these questions, make sure you use these vocabulary words or make sure you use perfect grammar, right? We don't want to do that. Yeah, somebody had a good point, Mohammed. It can be a sub-aim, yes. Yep. But I would say you still don't want to focus on the grammar or the vocabulary, even if it's a sub-aim during the reading tasks. Maybe that could be clearer. So if it's, let's say vocabulary is your sub-aim, perhaps you do a vocabulary post-teach or pre-teach, right? Somewhere before or after the reading exercises, and the students are doing some sort of practice worksheet with the vocabulary. That's fine. But during the actual reading part, if you're telling students, oh, and by the way, make sure you try to use the adjectives that we learned yesterday in your answers, that's too much. They should just be allowed to focus on the reading comprehension during the main reading portions of that lesson. Yeah, also good point. Time is essential. You will run out of time if you try to do that. Yes, good. Yep, and writing, yeah, Diana said, so writing is related with reading, but it's not the aim of the lesson. Again, if the students are taking notes at home, right, during the lesson and writing down their answers or typing their answers into the Google form, they're going to be physically writing. But you shouldn't tell them you need to write perfect full paragraphs or you need to write complete beautiful sentences with no mistakes. That's not what we're focusing on right now. Yes, exactly. So Sri Mariana said, writing skills could be a sub-aim. For example, if you give them a writing activity as the productive task, absolutely, but not during the reading tasks. Yep, and someone else just said it can be a follow-up task to consolidate the learning later on. Exactly. Okay, so last one. What do we think? Okay, this is the first one that's about 50-50, which I'm not surprised. And even some of you are kind of like 50-50 within yourself. Okay. I can tell my online English teachers are all saying don't. Awesome. So this is a don't, and it's actually a pretty big don't. Here's why. Bear with me. So I know why some teachers are tempted to say do. I understand why it was kind of a 50-50 split for this one. So one reason that it's tempting to think that it's a do is, first of all, because many of us had to do this in school, even in our own language as native languages, or when we were learning another language. This is a pretty common exercise. Did you enjoy it when you had to do that in school? I didn't. I found it very awkward, personally. Just reflect on that for a moment. Did you enjoy it, aside from whether it was useful or not? I'm guessing you probably didn't. So there's one reason right there why it's a don't. But some teachers think, okay, well, even if the students don't love it, it's still useful because it means that everybody's involved. Everybody's participating, everybody's on the same page. But think about that. If you're the person reading, what experience are you having? What's going on in your mind? You are probably so focused on the pronunciation. Yeah, Lorenzo said maybe feeling embarrassed. Suzanne said focusing on pronunciation. So you're trying not to make mistakes. Maybe so much so that you're not even really getting a chance to process and comprehend the meaning of what you're reading. Right? So the person reading out loud probably isn't as engaged as they could be in comprehension. Their comprehension is not being developed as much as it could be. If you haven't taken your turn yet, how are you feeling or what are you doing? You're maybe frantically trying to read ahead. You're nervous. You're trying to see if there's any hard words in your part. Yep, still stressed. If you've already taken your turn, how are you feeling or what are you doing? Yeah, you're maybe bored. You're already done. You're relaxed. You're checked out. Maybe you're still beating yourself up over that one word that you couldn't pronounce. And if you're anybody else in the lesson, maybe you're annoyed that the person is going too fast or too slow, or they're not pronouncing the words the way you think they should be pronounced, and you want to hear the teacher pronounce them. So I would argue that in that scenario, no one at all is engaged. And it takes a really long time for something that nobody is engaged in and no one is actually benefiting from in terms of reading comprehension. So then, okay, some teachers say, well, maybe that's a good, helpful way to practice pronunciation. Maybe, but is this a pronunciation lesson or pronunciation exercise? It's not, right? It's not the aim of the lesson. And if you really do want to practice pronunciation in a different lesson and a different activity, that's fine. But there are much more effective and motivating ways to practice pronunciation than reading an entire text out loud, right? So it doesn't really help for pronunciation either. Like, are you really going to stop and correct the student who's reading aloud every single time they make a pronunciation error? That sounds like pulling teeth, right? And somebody said, I give them the option. I ask for volunteers to read. Right. But then you probably have the same couple of people, I would imagine, who are confident. Whoops, I just got blurry. My camera will pick it back up in a second. You probably have the same group of people then volunteering every single time, who are more confident. And then the same people are never going to be involved. And then you still have the same issue of like, oh gosh, it's that one guy reading again. Like he's going to mess up all the pronunciation and it's going to be boring. Like it's still not going to work. Okay, so not good for pronunciation, not helpful for comprehension. Finally, why this is a don't is if you think about the last time you really wanted to read an article, like you thought, wow, this article is really interesting. Let me see what this is about, right? Let me learn something from this. Did you call up your friend and say, okay, so I want to read this article. So how about I send it to you and then I'll take a turn reading a paragraph out loud and then you read a paragraph out loud and then I'll read a paragraph out loud. No? Did you ever do that? Probably not, right? Because as adult proficient speakers or users of a language, we don't read things out loud in a group of people. So as much as possible, we want everything that we do in the classroom to prepare students for what they need to do with language in real life. That's the whole point of them taking this English class in the first place, is so when in their normal lives, they can use this language. So we want what we do in the class with reading to be the same as what students will need to do with reading in their lives. And probably they're not going to need to read something aloud. If you have a student who's preparing for a speech or a presentation, or I don't know, a poetry reading, sure, that's a totally different scenario. And then of course, that's a different skill that you need to practice. But just reading an article out loud is not authentic. Yes. So as Penny just said, focus on authentic reading tasks. Focus on authentic, any kind of task in the classroom should be authentic, not just reading tasks. So think about, okay, what are the students really going to need to do in real life when they read? Let's practice that. Yeah, great point, Layla. Sometimes we forget about the final destination we need to reach. That's so well said. That should always be in our minds, not just what's happening in the classroom, but how is what we're doing in the classroom helping students in real life? Because that's the whole point. That's our biggest aim of all, right? Good. Some people say, isn't there some benefit to having the students sort of hear the words in an auditory way? Honestly, is there? Maybe, but I think that would only be a benefit of hearing a proficient speaker read it, who's using correct pronunciation and intonation and pausing. And that would only be if you're preparing the students for a specific thing that's going to be verbal, like making a speech. So just for reading comprehension, no, it's not really beneficial. And it robs the students of the chance to practice their sort of normal silent reading comprehension skills. So don't have students read aloud, in case I didn't make that clear. If you're worried about the students being motivated, like if you're sitting there thinking, well, how will I know that they did the reading if I can't physically hear them reading out loud? Okay, well, that's why we set tasks. That's why we have the questions that we give the students in advance before they read, is so if the students know what they're doing with the reading, they have questions to answer, they read and answer the questions, and then afterwards we go over the answers. That's how we know that they've done the reading or that they understood the reading, is how they do when answering those questions. So that's the key. All right, awesome. Some really good points are being made in the chat. I love it. All right, so finally, my challenge to you, since this is the skills teaching challenge. So for you, now that we've talked about all of these things, going forward in your teaching, the next time you teach a reading lesson, here's what I would challenge you to try. So first of all, present the students with a task or the questions before they read. So really try out this task before text idea. And then instead of having the students read aloud, let the students read on their own with that clear task that you've set in mind. When they're finished, let them check in pairs. If you have a larger group, you can send them to breakout rooms and say, compare your answers with your partner, and then bring them back and go over the answers together. Then you can nominate the students, so-and-so, what did you say for number 2? Why? Where did you see that in the text, right? And see how it goes, see how it feels. There's going to be a different vibe. And it feels strange at first because it kind of feels like you're cheating, like you're not doing enough work if you're just sort of sitting there while the students read silently. It takes a minute to get used to that, but it's so much more useful for the students. And then finally, if you haven't done this before, make sure you allow the students to read that same text more than once, and try to structure it by doing kind of progressively more difficult tasks each time. Like the first time, give them some kind of easier, more general questions or an easier, more general task. The second time, have it be something that's a bit more challenging or more detailed, and see how it goes. Let them build their comprehension in that way. Okay, so finally, let's see, a few questions are coming up. Can we ask the handout for this webinar? I'm not sure what you mean by the handout. I don't offer the slides, but the recording will be available for a week. And you'll receive the link to the recording at the end of this session. For students really needing reading aloud skills, would you, on the side or after class, advise students to read aloud or at home every day so that their brain can hear them speak English text? First question is, why do students need read aloud skills? Like who are they reading aloud to, or why are they saying that they need that? Because if it's something like they're giving a presentation or a speech, that's different. And that should be a whole different kind of structure of exercise in terms of practicing writing and presenting a speech. But if the students themselves are really set on reading aloud, I guess, sure. I mean, at that point, it's kind of like, well, I guess the student is the paying customer. So if they're that insistent, let them do what they want. But I still don't know that there are that many benefits. Okay, and I've got a couple more questions. I'm going to move on just to this last part. So go ahead, and if I'm missing your question, stick it in the Q&A so I can get to it very shortly. Okay, so finally, a couple of common reading lesson mistakes that we want to avoid. So first off, don't make the mistake of not contextualizing the lesson. So what I mean by that is introducing the topic at the beginning of the lesson, like we talked about, instead of just saying, today we're going to do some reading, right? So make sure the students have activated their schemata, as many of you said, at the beginning of the lesson before they read. Don't make the mistake of not letting the students read more than once. So let them read multiple times, as we've said. And you're going to want to make sure you've designed useful and appropriate tasks for each, or found if it's in the book, for each reading stage. So that's another big mistake you'll want to avoid, is not setting appropriate reading tasks, which even if there is a task set, you need to make sure it's a useful and appropriate task. A common mistake that teachers still have is not quite knowing how to deal with students' questions. Like, what if they do ask about vocabulary, even though I didn't bring it up? Or what if they didn't understand all of the, like they didn't get the answers to the comprehension questions that I gave them and they're just not getting it? What do I do? And then finally, an issue always with any lesson, but with reading as well, is not allocating time and focus correctly in the lesson, like spending too much time in the lead-in or too much time on vocabulary and not leaving enough time for the reading exercises, and thus not accomplishing your aim of the lesson. So you'll want to avoid those mistakes. And this is kind of getting into why I started TEFL Horizons in the first place, is to provide this kind of training and these kind of answers. So for online specifically, because this is where it gets a bit tricky these days, is common reading lesson mistakes online are things like tech, not knowing how to present the text, right? Thanks, Tina. So for this, if you're interested in further training, learning how to avoid all of these things and how to really structure an effective reading lesson, as well as all of the other lesson types, I offer an online teacher training course specifically for online teaching called Online English Teacher. So enrollment is open now. It just opened for session 2. So it is ready if you're interested. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the course in case you're interested in that. And then we'll get to all of the rest of your questions. So the Q&A, I see some great questions coming up. Awesome. Okay, someone just said interested. Yes, so let me tell you a bit more about it so you know what to expect. And then I'll pop the link in the chat. So there are 2 options for Online English Teacher. If you're someone who really wants a flexible schedule, you can do a completely self-study version of the course. So either way, the course is fully online. But for self-study, it's totally flexible. You do it on your own schedule. You have access to all of the material as soon as you enroll, and then you work through it at your own pace. You can also opt into an additional live teaching practicum. So if you want actual training with live students and feedback, then you can opt into the live teaching practicum, and that will give you that experience, like the actual teaching and training that you're looking for. So the live practicum is 8 weeks. I'll tell you a little bit more about how that works shortly. So the content, what you can expect on the course, what you'll learn, there are 10 different modules, and there's 1 module on each of the big lesson types. So how to teach reading definitely is the first one. Module 2, how to teach listening, how to teach vocabulary, how to teach grammar, as you can see. And then there's also a bonus module on how to teach beginners, as well as an introduction that covers a lot of the fundamentals. So just kind of generally good teaching practices and methodology for any lesson type. So this is what you'll learn. Each module then contains a lot of different sort of tools that are going to help you understand how to teach that particular type of lesson. So each module has a section or a chapter in the Online English Teacher Guide. This serves essentially as your workbook and course book throughout the Online English Teacher program. So let's say you're doing Module 3 on how to teach a listening lesson. So you would first access that section of the Online English Teacher Guide that has a ton of useful stuff, some summaries. It has a breakdown of the stages and explanation of what to do in each stage of that particular lesson type. It has our favorite kind of do and don't exercise. And there are also a lot of notes. So as you're doing the other material, watching the videos and things, they're built in places for you to take notes and really focus your observation and your learning. So then from there, you'll watch what we call the focus video, which is a session that's going to be kind of like this. It will be me showing you the material on a slide, so everything's nice and visual, and going over step by step good practices for teaching that particular type of lesson. Again, you'll have templates where you can take notes in the guide if you want to really help focus as you are learning. So that's the focus video. From there, there are some additional exercises and there's a quiz in the course platform also, so you can review what you've learned and make sure you really got it, kind of test yourself. And then you'll actually observe a lesson. So again, if this is the how to teach listening module, for example, you would then actually watch a video of an actual listening lesson. So a lesson that I've taught to real students, and you would see exactly how all of those things that you just learned work in practice with real students. So you get to watch the video. There are places where you can take notes on the video and some kind of direction on what exactly to look for to help you focus your observation. And then you get the full lesson plan. So whatever lesson I taught in that observation video, you'll have the option to download the lesson plan and to download the entire PowerPoint presentation. So if you wanted to turn around and then teach that lesson with your own students, you can. You have everything that you need to do that. If you need any kind of tech tutorials, each module has at least, I'd say, 1 or 2 of these kind of extra videos. For example, the listening module has a tech tutorial about how to best put audio or video into a slide. There's an extra video about specifically CCQs, concept checking questions, what those are, how to make effective CCQs, sort of any extras that you need to really make that lesson type work. You'll have those additional videos included in the module. And then for the whole course, whether it's self-study or the live practicum, whichever one you choose, there's basically a course community that you can join, the Online English Teacher Network. So this is on a platform called Mighty Networks. It's really cool. I discovered it pretty recently. It's kind of like Facebook, where you log on and you have almost like a wall, right? Where you can post things, you can post links to things. I can post extra resources. You can comment on other people's posts. You can like other people's posts. So it's basically a really nice way to interact with everybody else who's enrolled in the course. So you still have that kind of community feeling. However, since it's not Facebook, you don't have to put up with all the other stuff, like the random articles, the people that you went to high school with that you don't want to keep in touch with, like popping up. It's none of that. It's a private, closed platform just for online English teachers in our course. So it's great. It's totally free. It's super easy to log in and very user-friendly. So you'll get access to that as well. It's a great place, even if you're doing the self-study. Like a lot of people when signing up for the self-study asked if they would still have access to me or their classmates to ask questions and things like that. And this is where you can do that. So you still get that aspect of it. So all of that is included in the self-study version of the course. If you opt into the live teaching practicum, that includes everything we just talked about in the self-study portion of the course, plus you get the opportunity to actually teach live lessons. So you'll teach 8 different live online classes to real English language learners on Zoom. You will plan a lesson. So you'll teach one of each type of lesson, and we do kind of an intro lesson before that. You will plan each of those lesson types with guidance from me based on what you've learned in that particular session. So like the second week, you'll teach a reading lesson. So you'll take everything that you learned in the module about reading, plan your reading lesson, get some one-on-one guidance from me. Then you'll teach that lesson, and then we'll do a feedback session afterwards. So I'll be observing you live as you teach. So I'm also there just in case you need any assistance in the moment. And then we'll do a feedback session. So we'll go over exactly what went well, and you'll get really nice tailored advice on how to improve that lesson type for each week. So you teach one lesson a week for 8 weeks. There's also the option to do asynchronous peer observation. So all of the videos just of the people enrolled in that live practicum session are put into a private platform just for those teachers. And so you can watch each other's lessons. That we found to be very helpful, because I can say things like, oh, you're working specifically on improving your vocabulary pre-teach stage. Go watch so-and-so's module 2 lesson. They had a really nice example of how to do that. So it's a really nice way that you can learn from the other people on the course as well. I've also created a teaching reflection journal, so you can take notes on kind of your own development as you progress. And then finally, you get sort of an additional certification and recommendation letter from me for enrolling in the live practicum that goes over, it details basically exactly what you've had training in on that part of the course, in getting that, really hands-on live practice on Zoom. Okay, so for the self-study version of the course, as it's completely self-study and totally flexible, you can enroll now or anytime for the live practice as well. So I'd recommend the sooner the better if this is something that you're interested in, because as soon as you enroll, you get access to all of the self-study material. You can start working through it whenever you want to. So for the self-study, if you wanted, you could follow it as an 8-week program and just do one module per week. You could also work faster or slower if you wanted to. It's just the live practicum that's on a schedule, since it's 8 weeks and since it involves coordinating with me and with the English learners. So the next live practicum session starts June 1st. It's technically going to be that Monday before, but this is a Tuesday, June 1st. And it goes 8 weeks. So it goes June 1st to July 23rd. They're only about, let's see, we have 8 spots total and 3 have been taken. Let me do super simple math as an English teacher. So you've got 5 spots left. So if that's something that you definitely want to do in June, don't wait to enroll in the course, because if the sessions fill up, then you'll have to wait till September. So that's for the live teaching practicum dates. And I'll show you how to enroll if you want that additional practicum and not just the self-study. So for enrollment, the enrollment fee for the self-study is $747. And then the live practicum is $997, and that's total. So it's everything included in the self-study plus the 8 weeks of teaching and the feedback and everything else. However, since we don't officially start the live practice until June, we're in what we call early enrollment now. So the early enrollment discount for getting in sooner before everybody else, it's just being advertised in these webinars, so you get the kind of insider information, is $150 off. So you get a big discount for enrolling sometime before May 5th. So you can save $150. It's only $597 for the self-study and only $847 for the live practice session to be added on. And again, that's $847 total, not additional. So that will last, that early enrollment discount lasts just until Wednesday, which is May 5th. So when the recordings are no longer available, the early enrollment discount will no longer be available either. And let me stick the link in the chat now, so you can check it out. It's just TEFLHorizons.com/online English teacher. All right, this is the platform that we use. So in addition to the Mighty Networks platform that I told you about, where it's kind of your social community, the platform that we use where the actual course material lives is called Teachable. And I'll show it to you quickly. It's very, very user-friendly, which is why I've chosen it to use as our course platform. So once you enroll in the course, I can show you exactly what it will look like. You'll create, it takes like 10 seconds. It guides you through creating login information. And this is the really nice thing about the course, is since it's a login situation, anytime there's any sort of update and you log in, it automatically will update for you. So you'll go to TEFLHorizons.teachable.com and log in, and then any course that you have access to will be displayed right here for you. So for example, online English teacher, if you've enrolled in the live practicum as well, you'll have this additional room, kind of special course room for just the live practice teachers. Once you click on it to enter the course, oh, thanks, Suzanne. She said, recommend the Grammar Guru course. Well, it's actually included in Online English Teacher. So I'll get to that in a second. Yeah, and then once you open the course, everything is right here. So you can see the different modules. You can click through. You can see where the videos are, where the quizzes are, the tech tutorials. So everything is right here. You can just start the video or that particular exercise whenever you'd like. If you want to go back and review something, you can just scroll back up, click start again, and go right back and watch something again. Oh, great question. What's the schedule for live practicum? So for example, the time of day when you'll be teaching. We can coordinate it sort of based on the teacher's schedules. Most likely, the bulk of the lessons will take place in the mornings, Eastern time, because since I'm further west than anyone living in Europe or Asia, most likely it'll be like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday mornings. You'll choose whichever one, so that it would be maybe evening for you if you live somewhere else, but we can coordinate. And it's just 1 hour per week of teaching time. Yep. All right. So that's what it looks like, the course curriculum. And then those are the only two things you have to navigate. Just Teachable, where everything lives. And then if you want to be social with the other teachers, you can jump onto the Online English Teacher Network and chat there, and then email. There's nothing else you have to navigate. So I've gotten some great questions about this course in terms of how it compares to other TEFL certifications. So the main thing is that Online English Teacher was designed to be an online course from the beginning. Most other TEFL certification courses, like some of the big ones and some of the kind of cheap Groupon type of ones, either they were designed online from the start and they're just like a quick like $10 Groupon thing that doesn't really offer great training, or they were one of like the big in-person kind of certification courses, and they had to adapt very quickly to being online. So the training is still awesome, right? But the platforms, everything else are kind of clunky because it all got sort of thrown onto the internet like, hey, let's figure this out. Online English Teacher was always meant to be online. So 2 platforms, super easy to use, and it's really streamlined. So I've made it purposely I designed it with very minimal platforms to navigate so that it's super user-friendly, because the tech, like accessing the course material, should not be a challenge, right? Like you should save your energy to focus on the content of the course that you're learning. The training itself is also set up, and I think personally a very logical way, in that we go through each of the lesson types individually. So module 1 is just about teaching in general, fundamentals. Module 2 is just about how to teach a reading lesson. And then it builds in a helpful way as well, that we start first with the 2 comprehension skills, reading and listening. Then we get into kind of the language lessons, vocabulary, grammar, functional language. Then we do the productive skills, and they all kind of build in a really helpful way on each other, so that even though in each module you're learning just one type of lesson, you'll see throughout the course how it connects and sort of how they integrate with the other lesson types. Oh, someone said, I wish I had found TEFL Horizons first before my CELTA. I get that a lot. I totally understand. We'll spread the word if you can. It's also a great way to do a CELTA review if that's something that you're looking for. I've had actually probably 6 or 7 of the teachers who did the live practicum in the last session had done a CELTA and just wanted a really good way to kind of put everything they'd learned on CELTA into more practice. So honestly, like, I don't think Online English Teacher competes with CELTA. They complement each other very well. So tech tutorials and step-by-step training. As I mentioned, everything is really logical. If you are tech phobic, this course is perfect for you, because I'm not natural at tech. Like, I'm not a natural. I had to learn, right? And so if I can do it, you can do it. And it also means that I know that you need things to be broken down for you in a way that's practical and simple. So that's what I've done with the tech tutorials. Everything is a video. So I just walk you through and show you, for example, how to set up a Google form, how to use Google Jamboard, right? How to use Google Docs, all of those things, not just how to use them in general, but how to use them and how to maximize them as teaching tools. Okay, so then if you opt into the live practicum, you get 8 hours of live online teaching, which is as much or more as you would get on any other training course. Ooh, a couple of really good questions coming up, which I'll get to in just a second. And then the great thing about this course is you get lifetime access. So with most other courses, it expires after a year or after a certain amount of time. You'll have access to this always. So if you want to 2 years later go back and review, you can take the course all over again if you want to without having to re-enroll or pay anything else. It's still there. If I ever update the course, if I add more information, if I add more videos, all of that will just appear for you when you log on. So it's kind of a living being in that sense, that the teachers can influence the material that they're getting as they're enrolled in the course. If someone says, hey, I still don't understand, I don't know, GIST tasks in a reading lesson, can you make an additional video? I can, and I can add it, and you'll just automatically have access to it. Great. And finally, the great thing about this is because of all of the different observations, because you also observe at least 7 different lessons, actual real lessons that I'm teaching, you get my lesson plan for each one and my entire PowerPoint slide for each one. So you're actually also purchasing, like included in the course enrollment, you're purchasing also teaching material that you could then just turn around and use with your students, like ready-made full lessons. Okay, great questions coming up. How can we access the webinar later? I will send you a link to the recording. So you'll receive that maybe an hour after we finish here. Yeah, someone said a CELTA review, it would be ideal. It's designed that way. It's perfect if you've done a CELTA, but it was in person. This is a perfect way to figure out how to put all of that online, because obviously it goes through the same sort of fundamentals and methodology as CELTA, so it's not going to be conflicting information. It's also perfect. Someone asked, is this course prep for CELTA? Absolutely. A lot of the CELTA candidates that I've worked with have said they wished they had done something before they took CELTA to help with the sort of online aspect of teaching. Because CELTA is amazing, but it doesn't give you a lot about the tech. It's mostly still focused on training, and it's kind of up to you, like the actual teaching, and you kind of have to figure out, or your trainer hopefully can help you figure out how to put everything into an online lesson format. But it's stressful because it's so fast paced. So you kind of end up playing catch up. So this is a perfect way to get really comfortable with the tech and then go absolutely rock your CELTA. Can you please share the upcoming schedule of CELTA course and the price? So this is not a CELTA course. This is Online English Teacher. And I'll put those slides back for you. So the upcoming schedule for the self-study is whenever you want it to start. As soon as you enroll, you will have access. The live teaching practicum dates, what will happen with the live teaching practicum, if this is what you want to do, enroll as soon as you can so that you can reserve your spot and not lose your spot in the live teaching practicum. And then you'll have instant access to all the self-study materials. So if you'd like to start kind of working through it, as much or as little as you want. And then the actual live teaching practice where you're sort of on a schedule will start June 1st. That's when we'll have your first lessons scheduled once a week going from June 1st to July 23rd. And cost, you asked about enrollment, is here. So for the self-study, this is the price. The discounted price, you save $150 by enrolling before Wednesday, and the live practicum. And again, this is for lifetime access, any future updates included. Will this course be a good alternative to CELTA? Yes. So I would say this course works as CELTA prep, CELTA review, or CELTA alternative, depending on what you're looking for. If the organization that you're working for has specifically asked for CELTA, then obviously that's what I would recommend. But I would say this, if you're looking for specifically online teaching, this is a great option for you, because you're going to get that training that allows you to teach online specifically. You'll have knowledge of all the tech. You'll have knowledge of how Zoom works, right? How all of the principles that you're learning in any other quality training course work on Zoom. And so what was I going to say? It's easy as well to see how all of those things apply in person, because you're still getting the methodology training. Like, you're still learning how to structure all of those different types of lessons and getting that really good understanding of what it means to be an effective teacher. It's not, so the course is not officially accredited, but it's something that I have a ton of information about it online. So any school could look and see that it includes sort of the big important things like actual live practice if you enroll in the practicum. And you also get a recommendation letter from me that describes exactly what you've done on the course. So if an employer has any questions, they can reach out to me personally, and I'm happy to vouch for the kind of training that you received. It is a TEFL certificate. Yes, it is a TEFL course. So TEFL just stands for Teaching English as a Foreign Language. So any course that's teaching you how to be an English teacher, right? How to teach English as another language is a TEFL course, technically. So this is a TEFL certification course. So it's perfect for kind of entry level. Like, if you've never taught before, this is an appropriate course for you. If you've done a lot of teaching before, but you haven't gotten a ton of formal training, this is also a great course because it's going to build on what you've already learned and experimented with. If you have done some training, but you're looking to kind of improve your training, refresh your knowledge, review, and get like a really good kind of like refresher, this is also perfect for you. Will the questions written in this chat be visible in the recording? Yes, I can actually download the chat before I sign out and then save that as well. Great. You're welcome, Henry. Thanks for coming. Okay, I think that's good on questions in the chat. We've got definitely more questions in the Q&A. So let's get there. Here we go. Great. A couple of things that people have said, current online English teachers in the course. Great. Give you a second to read these. So I've had so far the teachers that have gone through online English teacher are people who have either done a training course in the past and wanted a review. I've had a few people that wanted to use the course as like a prep for another training course coming up, and a few people who had taught in person but wanted to start teaching online and needed to learn exactly how to do that. And then also a few people who'd never taught before were just getting into teaching and were really looking forward to learning all that they could. Okay, so a few bonuses for online English teacher. Be Your Own Grammar Guru, this first one is huge, is actually included. So if you haven't enrolled in Online Grammar Guru yet, Be Your Own Grammar Guru, and you're interested in brushing up on your own grammar knowledge and having that as a reference, that's included with Online English Teacher, so it's totally free. As I mentioned, there's also that Teaching Beginners module, which is like its own little mini course, since that's kind of its own challenge in many ways. And you also get in the guide a reference book for grammar, teaching glossary, and kind of an activity bank with all the different activities that you learn going through the modules that you can use with your students. All right, so once again, I'll pop the link in the chat. Great to see you, Lorenzo. See you tomorrow for the next session. Okay, and the rest of the questions here. So Katrina asked, how do you split your screen for demonstration? Is the split screen option only open in Zoom? Is it available in Skype? Okay, I'm not sure what you mean for split screen. It probably, if you're talking about Zoom or Skype, there's an option when you share your screen. Like when you first click on screen share or share screen, it asks you what you want to share. If you want to share just one window, if you want to share your whole desktop. So you could technically do kind of split screen in that sense, that you could share your desktop and have two different screens open. They're each going to be kind of small though. Katrina, if you're still here and you have a follow-up question, let me know. Bye, Dee. See you tomorrow. Bye, Juliet. Yeah, I guess give me a little more information about what you mean by split your screen. My trick is that I use PowerPoint. Oh, here, your slides one half and your camera in the other. Oh, that's just when I share my screen. Yep, so that just happens naturally on Zoom or on Skype. When you share your screen, it's automatically, as long as your camera is turned on, it will automatically show the slides and also the camera. Yep. The next webinar is tomorrow at the same time. Maybe it should still, so Suzanne asked that maybe the split screen thing is because you're in a webinar, not a meeting. It should still do that. Like for me, if I'm observing a lesson, it's just a regular Zoom meeting, it still does that for me, where the slides are one half and the video is the other. The only time it doesn't work and I get like a floating bubble for the video of the person I'm watching is when I use a tablet or a phone. So it might just have to be a computer. All right, so question on writing lessons. Any advice for managing writing assignments with regard to being able to correct, edit them for students in a timely manner? My students love writing. Okay, actually, yes, Patrick, great question. Session number 4, webinar session number 4 is all about teaching writing. So that's on May 1st, same time, May 1st. We'll go through all of that. I've got great writing advice for you. Another question, can we pay in installments for the course? Yes, you can. When you go, let me just show you. Always easier to show instead of tell, isn't it? So here's what it looks like when you go to register. When you click on the link that I sent you for the online English teacher course, you'll get to a page like this. This is the enrollment page. You've got the timer at the top so that you don't miss out on the early enrollment discount. You can click on enroll now right here, or you can scroll down and read more information about the course and review exactly what's included. And then here, this is where we see the 2 options for the self-study or the live practicum version. Scroll down and then you can choose 4 options. So you can do pay in full for self-study or installments for self-study. So it's over 6 months. Or you've got the options for live practicum, pay in full, or installments. So you can choose whatever works for you. And if you do enroll now, it's going to take you to another similar place where you can choose which option you want. Great. Okay. Back to questions. I think we've got a few more here. If I'm tutoring one student, so one-on-one, do I change the way I present or teach English since there are only 2 of us? That's a great question. You don't have to change the format. Like you can still do the reading for gist. You can still do reading for detail. You still want to set the task up front. You still want to give the student time to read alone. So I'd say generally the format is the same. You don't change that much. Obviously, there isn't like a pair check stage where you send the student to breakout rooms. You can just kind of talk through the answers together. But no, it doesn't change that much. Do you have any tips for teaching reading online for learners who are not proficient in using technology? I have a group of middle-aged learners like 40 to 60 years old, and they struggle to use even basic functions like camera, mic, chat functions. Yes. Okay. Totally understand, Suzanne. This is partly just okay, let me back up. We talk a lot about this in Online English Teacher, kind of minimizing the amount of tech that you have to use, that you have to ask your students to use. That's why I'm personally a fan of PowerPoint or Google Slides, just having everything on the screen as much as I can, and then just getting the students to take pictures or screenshots. So if that's like the one thing that you can teach them tech-wise is how to take a screenshot, that might be your best bet. So if the students can just, the exercise is already there, just take a screenshot before you go to breakout rooms. Or if you don't need breakout rooms because you have a small group, then it'll just be on the screen the whole time. That's kind of minimal needing to use the chat or the mic. Yeah. And the other thing, Suzanne, that I find helps is having sort of consistent routines and signals for things. Like maybe, you just get in the habit of at the beginning of the lesson saying, okay, everybody turn on your mic. Everybody turn on your camera. Maybe you even have a signal for that. Like everyone turn on your mic. Everyone turn on your camera. That's off the top of my head, but if there's some kind of signal that's sort of a cue, the more you do it and the more it's the same. Okay, now we're going to check with your partners. Now everybody mute. Now everyone turn on your mics. That should help hopefully sort of get them more comfortable with technology if it's more predictable. You could also, Suzanne, let me type it in the chat. I don't know the website, but I'm sure if you search it, you can find it. It's called Loom. There's a free version, and even the paid version is not very expensive for what it is. It allows you to record videos, and it records your whole screen. So like pop-ups and things that don't normally get recorded, like when I'm sharing my screen on Zoom, are recorded on Loom. And so you could make like a quick tutorial video even that you send your students where you show them like, here's how you turn on your mic. Here's how you turn on your camera. Here's how you pull up the chat. And it just, once you've recorded the video, it just generates it as a link. Just send your students the link. They click on the link and they watch it. It's awesome. I use that in Online English Teacher sometimes to answer questions that are hard to explain. I'll say like, here, I made a quick video. Here's the link. Just go watch it. It'll show you how to do it. Cool. Okay. Great. I'm so glad you enjoyed this, Camilla. Okay, so I wanted to ask, I use English File and I love it. Yep, I tend to teach an hour online and just about get through one chapter per lesson. Oh, wow, that's a lot. Depending on the level, etc. This normally combines reading, writing, listening, and speaking skills in each lesson. Do you recommend one whole lesson dedicated to just one of these skills rather than a combination of all four? Such a good question. I love this question. And yes, you could maybe tell from my reaction that if you're getting through that much material, I think you're probably doing too much. So the motto I would say is always teach a lot about a little rather than a little about a lot. And so if you're doing all of those things, you're probably teaching a little bit about a lot of different things rather than doing one really good solid lesson on one thing. So I would recommend teaching just one lesson on reading. And it takes some training to be able to look at the coursebook page and understand, okay, I'm using this page, which has 8 different things on it. It has reading exercise, a vocab exercise, writing, grammar, to look at this page and figure out what part is the reading part. Like, how do I take just those and build this into a full effective reading lesson, for example? That's exactly the training that we do in Online English Teacher. And that's exactly the type of lesson, if you sign up for the live practicum, that you'll be teaching. Like that is literally what you'll do, is learn how to, and then put it into practice, design those kinds of focused lessons. Yes, there is a certificate for attending this webinar. When I send you the link to access the recording, there will be a button that you can push to download the certificate. Can the teacher read aloud? Why? That's my question. Why? What benefit is that giving the students? Right? Because that's not reading comprehension anymore. That's listening. The students can't read at their own pace without sort of having to diverge from what they're hearing the teacher do. So it's not the same as developing kind of useful, normal reading comprehension, authentic reading comprehension skills. So again, if it's a listening exercise and the students aren't reading along because your audio isn't working, then sure, that's like a sort of backup plan in a listening lesson, but it's not necessary in a reading lesson. I know it's hard to let go of the reading aloud thing, but really ask yourself, like, why? What benefit are they getting out of this when you keep in mind that the goal is reading comprehension? Okay, I teach EAP classes, and the reading texts are about case studies, and they're super long. Yes, I totally understand. I did jigsaw reading, awesome, and I taught the students the tips and tricks looking at the headings and then reading the topic sentence. Awesome. Through experiential learning. Sounds like you're doing great. I'm struggling to prioritize which words to be pre-taught. For some students, the text is too difficult, but I cannot simplify the text exactly because that's what they'll see in the reading for the final exam. Okay, yeah, that's such a good question. An exam reading is a whole other thing, isn't it? What I would suggest is not pre-teaching words because they're not going to get words pre-taught on the exam. They just have to deal with it. Bye, Galaxy S8, whoever you are. See you tomorrow. So what I would say is instead of actually thinking about like picking out words from the text and doing a pre-teach stage, you will want to teach the students strategies for determining the meaning of unknown words through context. You could teach a whole session on that. Like take a break from, just the reading exam prep lessons, for example, and like take the time to do, or like half a lesson or something where you actually go through with the students and teach them some strategies. Okay, if you see a word in the text that you don't know, what strategies can you use to figure it out? I should add a video about that. An online English teacher gave me a great idea. Thank you. Good question. What do you recommend as a follow-up exercise for a reading class? In the same lesson, follow-up exercise for the reading, you could do a speaking or a writing exercise in which the students somehow respond to the text and give their own opinion about it. That could, if you want to do a whole speaking or writing lesson, and we've got the sessions on that coming up later this week, you could do that as like a whole follow-up lesson in the next class. Like maybe they respond to what they read in some way. Okay, awesome. I think we're wrapping up. Great. I'm going to drop the link to Online English Teacher in the chat one more time. Next webinar is tomorrow. So don't forget, it's the same time every day, tomorrow and Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So we've got 3 more coming up. Listening is tomorrow. Speaking and writing are the 2 days after that. Oh, you're so very welcome. I'm so glad you loved the session. Awesome. Yes. Tell me how it goes. Show up tomorrow and tell me how it goes. Guessing the words from context. All right. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much for all of your participation. It was awesome to see all of you. And look out for the email from me shortly with the recording and the certificate link. All right. Bye, everybody. And before I forget, let me download this chat. There we go. Okay. Bye.